everyone to coming back to the channel. We are in the series of Redis Beyond Caching. And today we're going to be talking about Agentic memory and really Redis Agent Memory Server. And for that, I have Guy Rose back to pretty much come with us and talk through what is Redis Agent Memory Server. Before we get into the details and the discussion, let's go ahead and start with the actual, big question. That is, what is agentic memory? So Guy, let's go ahead and start the discussion. What do you think, or how can you explain in simple words what is agentic memory?
Well, at the risk of using the words of a thing to define it itself, it's memory for agents.
Yes.
That's not a very helpful definition, but I would say in simple words, it's kind of like it's storing stuff outside of the context window. So when your LLM's doing things, your context window's got sort of a history of all the things you've your entire conversation history and things it knows and all that sort of stuff. And there's things it knows that are baked into the network. Agentic memory is externalizing and creating sort of an equivalent of short-term and long-term memory, just like you would have in a human. And so instead of having it be all in the context window, you have what's relevant to the current conversation in the context window. And so you can then store that in, any sort of external medium. Of course, Redis is a fantastic choice. And we've got tooling to make that easier. But that's really, I think, agentic memory in a nutshell is that agent needs a place to sort of a scratch pad to write down things that are relevant for the conversation. Or if you've used like a Claude Code or any of those agents, they'll sometimes create little to-do lists of things they need to do. They're using some sort of agentic memory behind the scenes for that. I don't know exactly how they're going to implement it, but it's that sort of stuff. And you can store short-term memory, of course, and long-term memory. Short-term being, hey, you just mentioned this phone number, or you just said a thing in the context of this conversation. And long-term memory, where it learns things about longer-term things. Like, and I'll show some of these when we have a demo later. But like, if you're talking with an LLM about, say, ham radio, I'm into ham radio, then it would learn that you like ham radio and that your call sign is, WHGUI that's my call sign for all the ham radio people out there. And it will memorize these things about me. And then it can then recall them when it's relevant. Kind of like a person does.
Exactly. So I think it's important because, as you mentioned, one thing is if you don't have this, and this is coming to why memory is hard, or why agentic memory is hard, is that you don't have an agentic memory, then you are relying to have all that in the context.
Yeah, and that's money.
Yeah. Yes, because we're talking about, think about it, right? You're talking, interacting with an agent. You're typing text. It could many things, right? But that keeps growing, right? You're asking question. You're passing everything through that conversation. And every time you are interacting, it keeps growing. If you keep it in that context, right? So just, think about it when it comes to token cost. You are pretty much charged for that. And the bigger and
not
bigger,
only that, not only the cost of those tokens, but the performance as well. So if you've got a really long context window, that LLM, that process has to go through each token then and predict the next one.
Exactly.
So the longer the context gets, the longer the responses take. And so it's not just money, it's also time.
Exactly. Perfect. And I think when you were saying about out of the memory, right, the agents actually need that memory to actually, I will say improve over time, right? They can recall things out. They can remember things out instead of relying everything in the context. So I think that's a great summary, Guy.
Well, there's another really important detail. I'm pointing with my finger, but it's not on camera. There's another important detail here, which is this: when your context windows get really long, not only do they cost money and not only do they take longer, but there's also that needle in a haystack problem where there's a recency bias in LLMs where they tend to look at the first thing and the last thing, and they kind of ignore stuff in the middle. It's kind of like key ones are kind of like this too. I remember an interview with Dave Thomas, the not the programmer guy, but the Wendy's hamburger guy. And he said the most important bite of the hamburger was the first bite and the last bite. because you remember the first byte and you remember the last byte, and the rest of it's just kind of shoveling it in, right? And LLMs kind of do the same thing, where they'll remember the first topics of conversation. They'll remember the thing you said most recently. They tend to ignore the stuff in the middle, which is why this needle in a haystack sort of searches are a benchmark that they'll use, because you'll put one random fact in the middle of a bunch of other stuff. Will it find it? Well, lots of times they don't, because they look at the stuff at the beginning and they look at the stuff at the end and kind of blob together the stuff in the middle. And so keeping that context window small so that that doesn't happen, and keeping it focused on the very relevant things that we want to talk about for the next request is not a trivial undertaking. You need to manage very carefully what is going into each LLM request.
Yes. And I'll say I'll give it a third, you know, something to think through or idea. And I actually posted or blogged, I will say, maybe a few months ago, and it was on the whole benefit for energy, right? So just imagine the agents pretty much exploded the token count, right? So if normally you are chatting with your LLM, right, you have, let's say, a set amount of context or an average amount of context in the conversation, but once you add an agent, you're talking about it can triple the tokens that are consuming. Now, when you take that in the context of energy consumption and how you are saving and helping the world to reduce that plays a big factor, because you are processing more tokens, it needs more energy, right? And
That's why they cost more money.
exactly, so it helps reduce that energy consumption across the globe. So that I will say that could be a third point.
Well, maybe for you, I use 100% recycled electrons. So
Awesome. Awesome. So I would say we talk about, what is agentic memory. We touch a little bit of agent memory, why it's hard, right? We went through the context windows limit, right? We talked through all that. Then we will need reprompting, because we need to, continue passing that through and reprompt. So I think now is great that we can get into what is Redis Agent Memory Server, why it was created, what it is, and what we can do with it.
Well, fundamentally, it solves the previous point. Agent memory it'd be hard. So how do we make it easy? And so one of the guys on our team wrote Agent Memory Server to make it easy. And what it does basically two things, three-ish things. I'm going to say it does two things. The first thing it does is it keeps track of your conversation history for you. So if you just each turn through an LLM cycle, even if you just have one, it's like a simple conversation where you're just having a chatbot and it has a topic, and you get a system prompt that tells it what its topic is, and then you ask it a question and then it responds. You ask another question, it responds. You get this message history that needs to be stored. That's a fairly solved problem in a lot of cases, but that message history is always in the context, and it grows and it gets long. Well, Agent Memory Server will store that message history, and most significantly, when it gets too long, it'll summarize the older messages. That addresses it. That reduces the number of tokens, the context, the cost, the electricity, everything. And so it does that summarization for you, and does it for you automatically. So just as you're shoving your message history into Agent Memory Server, it will summarize it for you. And that's sort of its short-term memory model. It's kind of like if you're using Claude Code, and every now and then enter the / command to compact your context history so that it can get a summary. It's compacting for you, but it's doing it automatically. And then when it's time to then send your message history back to the LLM, you just ask the Agent Memory Server for the message history, and then it automatically compacts it for you and returns it for you. You can just hand it over. So that's one thing it does. So that's its short-term memory model. The other thing that does, and I think this is really cool, is that it will watch your conversation history, and then it spins up threads that will then extract long-term memories and save them off for you as well. So like I said earlier, I'm into ham radio. And so, I tell it we have a demo of this where I've told it, I've had conversations, and it has learned that I like ham radio and that I like podcasts about history. And So it stores those facts that it has learned about me into long-term memory, extracts them, and it does it automatically. That process of sending my messages in, it automatically extracts those memories. And then I ask for that big, give me my message history so that I can send it to the LLM. It includes those long-term memories as well. And so then it includes just the ones that are relevant to what we're talking about. So it looks at the message history and says, well, based on this message history, these are the long-term memories that are relevant. And so it only pulls just those in. It does that doing vector search with Redis. And then that all gets sent to the LLM, and the LLM now has context and memory, long-term memory, facts, data it has about you, and then it can generate a more accurate response. And it's really slick because you're just adding messages. You're basically making REST calls. In my case, I'll use TypeScript to add messages to your history. And then you're saying, give me what I should hand to the LLM. And so you really got two calls, messages in, and it actually, it's actually really cool because the message format, the JSON you get back, matches the format that OpenAI uses. So you can just literally use the direct OpenAI API and just pass that message along. You don't even have to transform it or anything. So it makes it super simple.
That is great. Yeah.
I'm talking really fast because it's like, this is cool tech, right?
Yeah, it is.
It takes something that's that you have to engineer and just kind of does it for you automatically.
Yeah. And I
Well,
think
not just kind of does it for you automatically. It does do it for you automatically.
yeah, I think this all great because, you know, I feel that we haven't, at least on the Azure side, right, on the Microsoft side that I'm focused on, I haven't or haven't seen it speak a lot about the benefit that it brings, right? Even in the Microsoft AI stack, right? What this agent memory server will help you with your agents and so on, right? So I think this is great information for everyone that's right now building agents and will encounter. I'm pretty sure they're going to encounter limits and problems when they decide to push their agents to production, for example, or how to scale the agent. If they don't have an agentic memory in place, they will absolutely encounter problems, right? So these are perfect timing for it. Now, if we go back, right, we were able to talk about what is Agent Memory Server, and let's focus a little bit on pretty much the interaction of Agent Memory Server and Redis in general. I will say, I'll stay in the Azure Managed Redis world at the moment, but pretty much, why Azure Managed Redis is the perfect fit and why it plays so well, right? Is because Azure Managed Redis is the best of the world of Redis in Azure, right? So it has low latency, high throughput, memory access. It's production Redis, it's scalable. So it's a perfect fit for those agent workloads that are running in Azure. So I would say, that's the key thing that I want you guys to keep in mind, right? You have Agent Memory Server, and it supports, or you can use Azure Managed Redis to be that, I would say, infrastructure or memory side that will work with Agent Memory Server. So with that, I think our next part or section is to actually go to the demo.
I have a demo. It does run on Azure. It's running locally on my hard drive right now, but you can do an AZD up and it will deploy all the resources and everything. And yeah, let's share my screen and we'll do a demo. I wrote a little, I call it Podbot. It's a podcast chatbot. So, it's a portmanteau, right? Smush the words together. Everything's a bot, right? So let's do this screen sharing here. I'm going to be brave and share my entire secondary monitor. And then I'm going to look to the left here because that's where my monitor's at. I'm not ignoring everyone. So this is Podbot. I don't know how well you can see it. Maybe I should embiggen this a little bit here, make that a little more readable.
Good.
We'll see how the rest of my styling goes. I use Tailwind behind the scenes. And so we got this bogus login screen, but we're storing things on a per user basis. And so you just enter whatever name you want. I'm going to enter my username of Guy because that name is never taken.
Mm-hmm.
And my password just needs to be password. And it just confirms that it's password. There we go. So here are some podcast sessions I've had. There's some that are kind of old here from like 70 days ago. This one's these are older, but this is one I was playing around with yesterday, and I said, in addition to ham radio, I'm also a big fan of history. What history podcast would you recommend? And then it responds and this sort of stuff. And let's go ahead and create a new session here. So what should we Podbot's all about talking about podcasts. There's no RAG or anything here. It's not like looking up podcast data. It just is going off what it knows. And I'm using GPT 4.0 mini.
Okay.
So its training data is a little out of date and it's not the biggest model. I'm just saving tokens. It's a demo, but you could easily swap this out for bigger stuff. I say, what kind of podcasts, I'm going to just be real informal here, do you recommend for long road trips?
This is perfect. So if people are into doing RV or just driving around, right? Long drive. Maybe truck drivers. Maybe just your recreation, right? You just like to go, very far away. This is great.
So what's interesting here, because I've had conversations with this before, and it has extracted long-term memories about me. It knows that I like history. It knows that I like ham radio. And so it has recommended several history podcasts because that was in its context window, because it went out. Agent Memory Server took my request, brought in the long-term memories, and then there's not any conversation history here yet, but it reused those long-term memories to recommend me history podcasts. So here's stuff you missed in history class, hardcore history, which if you're into history and you haven't listened to hardcore history, get on it. It's amazing. Revolutions, history of Rome. And this is the history of Hollywood's golden age. And then here's a couple of ham radio podcasts that are recommended because it knows I'm into ham radio. Now let's see if I can shove a new fact into its memory here. Okay. Let's say I also am a huge fan of science fiction. Any podcast, audio book types of things out there? And we'll let it go here. And then of course, again, I'm using a Cloud LLM here, and I'm using 4.0. And so it's, this is actually one of the reasons why it's so important to have agent memory and using Redis for that specifically, is because you're already waiting on the LLMs. They are sort of intrinsically slow. So anything that you can shave off of that to make the user experience better, you don't want to have to add, hundreds of milliseconds of response time waiting on databases. You want it back in a couple milliseconds. So here is some more LeVar Burton. Welcome to Night Vale. That's a fun podcast. And so they've recommended some other podcasts. It's a chatbot, right? But it's neat because it picked up memories. And so if I go over here and show the message history here, this is the actual message history that's being pulled back and forth from a Redis Agent Memory Server. And so here we haven't compacted anything yet because there isn't enough history to compact. And so it's just got just our conversation history. That's all it is. But if we go to, let's see if I can find one. I think here's a conversation I had a couple months ago. You get your compacted context, and it is summarized the message, and then we only have 6 messages in the recent message history. I forced it to compact it by saying, give me really big, long lists of podcasts, and then eventually it triggered a compaction. But yeah, so here's my
here, Guy.
Yeah.
Just for everybody to understand, on the left side, those are sessions that are happening. Where are those or these sessions stored? Are they also stored in Redis?
Yeah, everything's stored in Redis. So I'm storing, I actually store the entire conversation history in its uncompacted format in an event stream in Redis.
Mm-hmm.
I've got a sorted set for each user that stores all of their sessions here on the left. These IDs are ULIDs. They're just, they're like, if you're not familiar with ULID, it's the UUID, but human readable and more letters. So yeah, everything is being stored in Redis. Agent Memory Server is using Redis. I'm using Redis. And if I were to implement some sort of RAG system on here that had like some sort of search mechanism that we could use to find actual information about current podcasts, I would incorporate that and put that in Redis as well. Let's look at the long-term memory. So we got the little brain icon here. If we click on that, this is the memories that it has learned about me. They're facts it has learned about me. So it knows I'm a big fan of history. Knows I like history-themed podcasts such as these. And it's some of these are a little redundant, I've noticed. A user likes ham radio. It did not actually pull out. We usually go on a cross-country road trip soon. It picked that out from a conversation back in December. It hasn't picked out yet that I'm a big fan of science fiction and novels. And there is a separate thread that happens that does this. And so it doesn't always do it immediately. So it is an asynchronous process. It doesn't make, like when you send all your messages in, it doesn't then, well, hang on, wait, let me extract all the long-term memories out of this. It just returns a response and then asynchronously goes out and generates these long-term memories. But yeah, it's pretty slick. Yeah, the memories don't change between your sessions. They're the same because they're long-term. They're associated with the user. So yeah, this is Podbot. I think it's pretty cool. It shows that, like, obviously this is unscripted. I'm using an LLM. Who knows what you're going to get, right? And it immediately picked out those long-term facts and said, let's give them history and ham radio podcasts.
Okay.
Just from a otherwise brand new session. So I think it's pretty cool. And obviously this is a toy example. And even this toy example using fairly small mini models that are a couple years old at this point, created some fairly compelling experience. So I think it's very exciting.
Yeah, absolutely, Guy. I think that's exactly why I wanted to show to everybody. Hey, if you are building agents, if you are just playing in general in the agentic world, you will need agentic memory, and I think Agent Memory Server is a perfect infrastructure that can help you with not only short-term memory, long-term memory, how fast it recalls things and bring things back to the agent. Also helps you save money, right, with that reduction because it doesn't have to do pass all the context. So token reduction, savings on that, saving of course energy in the world. So it's a perfect utility to explore. So if you are into agents, go ahead, give it a try. If you are in Azure, absolutely check out Azure Managed Redis. I think it's really, really, really hot. I think, just to give you a little bit of what has happened in the past few months, we already went into Azure Architecture Center, revamp a bunch of the reference architectures to look at Azure Managed Redis. A great job to everyone that helped out there with that. And we right now have a golden architecture that uses Microsoft Foundry and Agent Framework and Azure Managed Redis. So check it out, and please, if you like this video, subscribe, thumbs up, and see you on the next episode.
See you later.
Thank you, guys.
You're welcome.